Hey folks, it's Faz from Fazlifts. Today's video is going to be a highly specialized, niche, nuanced video which is designed to help some of you guys who are looking to get into contest shape or beach shape. This is for guys who are already in striking range and looking to get down a lot further. Now, as you get closer to being completely fat-free, you need to, by necessity, do things a little bit slower, but also there are some nuances which I've found are quite helpful. So some of the information in this video is not going to make a lot of sense for guys who are a lot fatter. If you're over 20% body fat, you may still be able to get away with harsher deficits, a lot of fasting, and all kinds of other approaches, which you can get away with when you've got a bit more fat on your frame, when you're a bit further away from that critical fat stage. Now, when you get down to the striking range, the last sort of 10% or so, you've got to take things a bit slower. And that's where some of this that I'm about to outline becomes a bit more important, okay? So for those of you who want to do fasting and are a bit larger, fine, cool, do your thing, but this video isn't really speaking to you. I want to say that up front because people tend to have a good habit of misinterpreting these things. No offense intended to anyone listening, but I want to just make sure people understand. This is for lean people looking to get absolutely peeled. If you're running around with a flabby stomach and love handles, this is probably not for you. So to begin with, let's discuss sort of the overall starting point. Now, we're going to be focusing on a macro and calorie approach. And I think when it comes to getting contest lean, it becomes a lot more problematic to use approaches which don't rely on macros and calories. You can do instinctive eating. You can do all that stuff, but it requires somebody who's a lot more in tune with their body and their physique. So to begin with, we're going to start with macros and calories, and we're going to build on that, okay? So in terms of overall calories, this is not the time for harsh deficits. This is the time to have a gentle deficit, which allows you to whittle down your body fat week by week at maybe something like 1 pound or 1/2 pound per week. Again, this is why it's for people who are already quite lean and are looking to get down to that absolute critical zone where they are virtually fat-free. So I would start with something like body weight in pounds times 15. There are plenty of ways to calculate your maintenance calories, plenty of ways. Catch McCullough formula and lots of online formulas which give you the impression of accuracy. But the majority of them, if you're already relatively lean, will come out to about body weight times 15. Okay, so start there. Besides, a starting point is just that. It's just a line in the sand. We are going to adapt and to change over the course of your prep regardless. So what I would do is start with body weight times 15. So that means if you are 200 pounds, which is a big boy, if you're natural, 200 pounds times 15 is 3,000 calories. If you're 180 pounds, that's about 2,700 calories. Okay, you get the idea. Start there. It's a reasonable starting point, and by necessity, you're going to have to reduce that over the course of the prep, or perhaps change macro ratios in an effort to get the body fat off. Now, next thing to look at is protein. This is probably the area where some of you guys will have disagreements with me. And again, it's because what I've noticed in myself, but also in people I've prepped, is that the current scientific recommendations for protein are lacking for those in a contest prep for various reasons. I don't think it's all about muscle retention. I think having a higher degree of protein in a deficit when you're that lean, it represents an unusual, abnormal situation, which we don't really see in the research. We don't really see people who are a genuine 12%, 10%, 8%, 6% in the research. So from what I've seen in people I've prepped, both men and women, I've seen that getting protein up to about 1.5 grams per pound of lean body weight is a great place to start with. And that could be ramped up even higher depending on how the fat loss goes over the course of the prep. So that's a good starting point. For some of you, that might be extreme, but it's a starting point. So let's do some numbers on that. Let's go back to our 200 pound guy. And let's say you are currently 20% body fat. That's where you're starting your prep. You're on the heavier side of where I would start a prep. Okay, 200 pounds, lean body mass would be about 160. If we take off a full 20%, let's say you shred it down completely just to your lean body mass. So take 160, times that by 1.5, we have 240. You're at 240 grams of protein at a starting point, which will more than likely be kept either the same or increased during the course of the prep as you get smaller. You may well lose 20, 30, 40 pounds during the course of a prep, but that protein amount would stay consistent or even rise higher, because over the course of the prep, it will become more and more likely that you may lose muscle as you get down to critical body fat levels. Also, appetite and satiety will be a problem as you get down to those levels. And again, for those guys who have never been down that low, I know maybe thinking my appetite would be fine. Trust me, anyone who gets down to those critical levels, appetite becomes a problem. And I would say, particularly for guys who are not used to being hungry, so the leaner guys who walk around lean all year round, they oftentimes have the hardest trouble with these types of diets because they've never been hungry before. Sometimes the easiest guys to prep are the guys who have been fat before, because they understand the struggle. They understand what hunger is. For them, hunger's just another Tuesday. For some guys who are naturally lean, they've never been hungry. So getting them down to 6% body fat where they're critically lean, well, it's a new stress for them. So protein, start at 240 for this imaginary 200-pound guy at 20% body fat. It is lean body mass times 1.5. Okay, that's where you'd start. Over the course of the prep, that's more than likely going to be raised or at least maintained, depending on appetite, depending on what we want to get out of the body. Like, for example, if we were to keep the overall calories the same and just raise protein and lower carbs and lower fat to compensate, we would actually drop body fat, because we would have this net effect where we have the situation where we would oxidize more of the calories we're eating. Also, the thermogenic effect of protein is higher than carbs and fat. So there would be a slight calorie reduction just based on having more protein and less carbs to boot, even if we equalize the calories. So it's a lever we can pull. It's an unusual one because I think most people are told just to keep protein at 1 gram per pound. But for contest prep, it's an unusual situation. So for you guys who are looking to get down very lean, bear this in mind. Satiety is also another factor. So let's now look on to carbs and fats. I'm going to discuss fats first. Now, so in terms of carbs and fats, I'm a big believer in having a reasonable minimal level of fats. I think they're good for satiety, they're good for hormonal health, and particularly for women. For women, you don't want to suffer from amenorrhea, like losing your menstruation over the course of the month. Keeping fat at least a reasonable amount is part of that puzzle. That will help the body maintain its hormonal status. That alongside not dieting too quickly or too hard. So fat, I would like to keep at a reasonable amount. I think depending on your caloric intake, I wouldn't want it dropped lower than about 40 to 50 grams over the course of a prep. Fight to keep it there. Now, in the most extreme cases, you may want to dip it further, okay? But I wouldn't dip it further for long. So about 40 to 50 grams, regardless of caloric intake, okay? Just a flat, blank 40 to 50 grams. I wouldn't want to go down to 20 grams for extended periods of time, for example. Even in enhanced clients, it does not do good things just for general mind state, also for health as well. Having those essential fats in ensures you stay healthy, your cholesterol looks good, your lipids look good. So when it comes to carbs generally make up the remainder. But what I have found at this point is there are certain groups of people who tend to respond a little bit better to more fat and less carbs, proportionally speaking, within the same overall calorie level. So from what I've seen, women, but also men who tend to deposit a lot more fat around their midsections. But from what I've seen in my experience of prepping these types of people, they tend to do better with a slightly higher fat intake and slightly lower carb intake. For those groups of people, for women and for men who have that midsection fat distribution, I would aim to push the fat a little bit higher, maybe 60, 70, 80 grams, depending on where we are in the prep and depending on what we can get away with. And ensuring that carbs are just lowered a little bit. We don't have to go to ketosis. That's not the goal. If it happens, but it's not the goal. It's also not the goal to avoid ketosis either. It's one of those things. If it happens, it happens. So the remainder would be attributed to carbs. And for these groups of people, the carbs will be mostly kept around the workout. This is where peri-workout nutrition does actually play a role. You do want to try and have some carbs in the meals preceding your workout. Maybe, if you can afford the calories, maybe even during your workout, like an intra-workout, possibly after, but not as necessary in my experience. If you do it before, the carbs will be digesting over the course of the workout giving you energy, going to your bloodstream, and they will also serve to replenish your glycogen while you work out in the hours afterwards. So not always necessary to eat carbs directly afterwards. Get your protein in, of course. Protein will deliver its own insulin spike, so there's no problem with that. But it's really a case of trying to optimize satiety and health. That's the thing. So if you can stick to your diet and remain healthy, you'll have the better chance of getting absolutely peeled. Okay. So far we've discussed overall calories. Start with body weight times 15. And again, body fat doesn't really come into it because you're all going to be lean at this point. If not, this is not the video for you. Okay. This is a contest prep starting off video. So body weight times 15, body weight in pounds times 15 is a good starting point for calories. For protein intake, I would start with 1.5 grams per pound of lean body weight. Okay, and that is a starting point. That may be titrated upwards over the course of the prep, depending on satiety and convenience. Obviously, that amount of protein costs more. It also a lot more to chug down. It's a lot easier to chug down rice and pasta than it is to chug down chicken breast, beef, whey, all that kind of stuff, right? When it comes to fat intake, I don't want it to drop lower than about 40 to 50 grams. Now, in terms of where to get the fat from, well, I think you're going to get a fair bit of incidental fat just from your meat. If you're eating that much meat, that much protein, there's quite a lot that comes with it. For example, let's say your protein intake is 250 grams a day. That's 5 meals of 50 grams of protein. That's a lot of protein. It's maybe 2 scoops of whey protein. It's 200 grams of chicken, 200 grams of beef, lean beef. Having that evenly distributed across the day is going to do quite a lot for your satiety. So you need to be able to chug through it as well. So that's protein, that's fat. Carbs is the remainder. And also just a special note for people who do carry a lot of weight around their midsections, or for women, that's when I would generally prefer a slightly higher fat intake, pushing as high as I can get away with within the allotted calories and keeping carbs a little bit lower. It just seems to help with satiety and also muscle retention. Now, if we next move on to fiber, I would like to place fiber at a minimum of 50 grams a day, which is quite a lot. And again, that's a starting point. That may go lower over the course of the prep. But why? Well, because if you think about it, right, let's just strip it back to the basics in terms of common sense here. If you're having 240, 250 grams of protein per day, as well as 50 grams of fiber, you are going to be very limited with your choice of foods. Like those foods, by necessity, are going to be very, very filling because they're going to be mostly lean proteins and vegetables, or very filling carbohydrates like potatoes. So by necessity, you're eating a diet which is predominantly whole foods, which is going to be very filling, which is going to be crucial getting down to critical body fat levels. And again, just to remind you guys, if you guys have just jumped into this video, this is for getting down to critical body fat levels. If you've never done it, I don't care if you are naturally lean or naturally fat, everyone struggles, okay? And it's usually the leaner guys who struggle more because they're not used to being hungry. So that is fiber, we've covered that. Now, I want to also discuss how many meals per day, okay? I would push for at least 5. The reason being that protein can't be stored in the body. We have to have protein available at any point during the day. Let's say you do something like OMAD, where you just eat 250 grams of protein at night and nothing else. It's really not going to be the best thing for your physique. You are going to lose muscle. You won't stay as big, you won't stay as full. So we are trying to optimize things. And yes, and let's just briefly talk about optimization for a second, because a lot of what I'm saying here is what I consider to be optimal stuff. And the comeback to that might be, well, you know what, Faz, I don't want to do things optimally. And that's fine. I'm not telling you to do things in any one way. Quite frankly, if you get to the finishing line, whatever way you do it, it's absolutely fine. If you can get contest shredded, doing it a different way, cool. Happy for you, right? However, what I would say is, with regards to this, what I'm trying to do is get you to the end result with the least discomfort, but also with the most efficiency. So for example, let's say you do cut a few corners. Okay, let's say you drop protein intake low, 160 rather than 250. Let's say you have 1 meal a day. You have that 160 grams of protein, okay? And let's say you get to the end of the prep. That may well take you a little bit longer in the prep for various reasons. Perhaps you get hungry, perhaps you binge, who knows, whatever it is. But the inefficiencies will show up. So you might be sat there at month 5 of the prep, still thinking to yourself, hey, I've got 2 months to go of this prep, looking down at yourself going, I've got 2 months to go. Whereas if you had done the prep and just made a couple of changes, just carried on optimizing a little bit, just so every day you were doing things right, you may well be at the end of your prep in 5 months. That may be the end of it. Otherwise, you might be sat there thinking, well, I was kind to myself. I did it on my schedule. I did it in my way. I cut a few corners. I was more kind to myself. But you know what? Looking down at myself, I've got 2 months left. So is that being kind to yourself? I don't know. I think you have to bear that in mind. There is optimization. There is being kind to yourself, okay? But you have to bear in mind what happens on the other end, because you're going to end this diet at some point. Presumably, you don't want to be stuck in this diet for the next year or 2 years or 3 years or never get it done. You want to get it right. So my advice is make the tweaks, do what is reasonable within your schedule, what your schedule allows, get it done as soon as you can in a reasonable time frame, and then be done with it. Get back on with your bulk. If you want to insist on doing the prep in inefficient ways, feel free. And if you get to the end result, fantastic. But just bear in mind, you might just be shooting yourself in the foot later down the line. A prep which should have taken 5 months may well take 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, or you may never get into condition. So just bear that in mind. Oh, one last thing, just to re-emphasize, this is a starting point. Okay, it's just a line in the sand. This will change week by week, month by month. Now, for changes for objectivity, it is best to hire a coach. I am available. My link's in the description. You can get in touch. We can discuss it. But having a coach gives you that external objective eye and is very, very important as you get leaner and leaner. When people are venturing into new territory, whether that's getting the leanest they've ever done, whether it's getting the strongest they ever have, whether it's getting the biggest they ever have, people tend to go a bit kooky. The body likes homeostasis. I've seen it happen. I've seen people 6 weeks out do some really weird stuff. I've seen people the strongest they've ever been change their routines willy-nilly for no reason, just lose 2 years of progress. The biggest they've ever been, the strongest, then just decide, I'm going to do what this guy's doing because he says it's better. He's found something wrong with my program. Maybe I should change it, even though you're the biggest and strongest you ever have been. People do wild things. This is why they need coaches. This is why objectivity is important. So there's a link in the description. Get in touch. And it is something to think about, because as we get into the next year, you probably are going to need 5-6 months to prep for a natural show. So most shows will be about mid-year next year. It's something to bear in mind. Get in touch if you are interested in doing a show next year, your first show, your third show, whatever it is. Take it from somebody who knows, who does prep, contest prep clients. Right, folks, I'm going to call it there. A very niche video. Won't be applicable to a lot of you, but it is a part of the Fazlifts brand. It is what I do. I do coach both men and women to contest shape, and I have done for years, and I've done it myself. So get with somebody who actually knows and has the experience to do it. All right, take care. See you in the next